Welcome to episode 82 of The Route, presented by Jobs in Sports. The Route is a glorified sports business coffee chat that has a new guest every episode as they share their experiences and route in sports. I'm Christopher Nascimento, and let's get started. So, as always, before we kind of get into today's guest, just a few things to cover. First off, if you haven't already, subscribe or follow the podcast. We have a couple of the platforms we're on here if you're watching on video. We're also on all major audio podcast platforms, so Spotify, Apple, Google, Anchor, etc. There's, I think, 10 others. And then just follow us there. It helps us grow. And if you're able to, like on Apple, rate 5 stars, as that goes a long way into growing the podcast. And parlaying off of that, also follow us on social media at The Route Sports. So we're on LinkedIn. That's the big one for those of you listening, with a lot of us here being sports professionals or sports business students. So check us out there. It's a great way to start growing your network. And then from there, we're also on, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, check us out there. You can find us in the link in the description as well. But with all that now covered, we kind of get to the nitty gritty of it. So let's get into today's guest. I'd now like to welcome someone who has grown with the Adidas brand. They're the current director of licensed U.S. sports and sports marketing at Adidas Group, Jeff McDonell. Welcome to The Route. Jeff, how's it going?
It's going well, Chris. Good to see you.
Yeah, thank you. So, Jeff and I were just talking, lots of little similarities. So where Jeff just went down the road to university at Carleton, my rival school, apparently. Let's maybe starting about maybe your time at Carleton and how, we got to where we are today.
For sure. Ottawa is not, Carleton is the school. You're our rival school. So let's just get that first, okay?
Okay. Yeah.
I grew up in a town just outside of Cornwall, Lancaster to be precise. It had about, at the time when I was a kid, there was about 700 people, maybe.
Wow.
Graduated high school, and a lot of my extended family, my dad, my mother was in education, aunts, uncles were teachers. So I went to Ottawa, I went to Carleton.
You wish, right?
Yeah, I wish. I went to Carleton for an English and history degree, and with the full intent of, frankly, becoming a teacher when all was said and done. And then about halfway through my university career, I kind of started to want to look at other options. And one of the options, kind of being, the typical kid from Canada, grew up with sports, played sports. I thought, well, maybe something in the sports industry. So I got my degree from Carleton. And then when I was done that, I didn't want to go to teachers college. I wanted to kind of take a look at some other things. So I signed up for a 2-year marketing program at Algonquin, which at the time didn't have a specific sports marketing program. It was basically just marketing. And I know there are a lot of schools in Canada that do have specific sports marketing, but I kind of wanted to just get a broader sense of what marketing was. So I applied there and got in, and started to kind of fish around for different roles that I could potentially take. And as luck would have it, my aunt, Sheila McDonell, who was a teacher at Algonquin at the time, knew the director of marketing for the Ottawa 67s.
Oh.
So it wasn't part of the course requirement. It was just more so, hey, this is something I want to kind of take a look at. So I basically, she hooked me up with Doug Drain, and I basically volunteered on game nights for the 67. So my Friday nights and my Sunday afternoons, in a lot of the cases, were down at the arena, helping fans, running some contests, and kind of getting to see the inner workings of how a junior hockey team works. And basically, it was my first step into sports marketing. And I was hooked. I just, I love the atmosphere. I love being around, the rink and the, kind of the fans and the excitement. And at the time, the 67s they put in a bid for the Memorial Cup. And I kind of got to see how the inner workings of that went. They didn't get the bid. And I remember seeing the disappointment on, the owners and Doug's face at the time. And it was an eye-opening experience for me that not everything in sports is always great, but it really kind of gave me a look at how the business works. So from there, I graduated from Algonquin. and just started to kind of fish around for jobs. And oddly enough, Mizuno Corporation, which not a very well-known sporting goods brand in Canada, but is probably one of the bigger sporting brands in the world at the time, was hiring for a bilingual customer service rep in Toronto, in Mississauga. And having moved to Mississauga that summer, I applied, didn't get the first crack. So I spent that summer working at Ontario Place, which at the time was still kind of an amusement park, and was in their marketing department, did a summer there. The Mizuno job came back up, and I applied and got it. So I was basically the Montreal-based, the Montreal customer-based customer service rep for Mizuno Canada. Mm-hmm. And to be honest with you, that to me was a dream job. I was, at the time, Mizuno was selling golf clubs and running shoes and apparel. And as a kid, just really coming out of school, the money wasn't great, but I was in sports, and I just knew that this was something I wanted to do. And the teaching thing just by that point kind of fell off into the distance. And my family supported me fully to kind of pursue what I was after. So from, I think about 94, maybe 95 to 99, I was at Mizuno. They treated me well. And we had a president by the name there of Jim Gable, who many of your listeners probably know well. He's kind of a pretty big name in the sports marketing world. He was our president at the time. And just before he left to take another job, I saw a job with the National Hockey League here in Toronto. It was for a manager of retail sales and marketing. And if you're a kid growing up in Canada, to work with the NHL, I had to take a shot. I probably was underqualified, probably wasn't necessarily ready for a position like that, but I went through the interview process. And someone who I can still consider not only a mentor and a friend, Barry Monahan. We went through 3 interviews. I interviewed with Glenn Wakefield, who was the general manager of NHL Enterprises at the time. And on Christmas Eve of 1998, I got the call to say, you're now working for the NHL. Wow. Best Christmas present to this day that I think I've ever gotten. Yeah. So basically, the enterprises arm of the league, we handle all the licensing. We handle all the licensing, retail sales, work with the teams to kind of not only kind of choose what products to buy, but to help them sell through, deal with licensees. At the time at the NHL, there was more than one NHL jersey licensee, which is us right now. So managing those relationships, and was there till 2004. And as a kid, kind of coming from a small town in Eastern Ontario, to hand out hats at the Stanley Cup final, and to be on the bench, and to be in those arenas, and to be at All-Star games, and just to be down at a Leafs game. I had the privilege of taking my father to the last game in Maple Leaf Gardens, which, to be honest with you, Chris, there's no chance in hell that would ever happen if I wasn't in the industry. It was unreal for me. And if the lockout of 2004 doesn't happen, I might still be at the NHL, to be totally honest with you. But, things happen. The lockout hits. Obviously, it lasts a year, and the NHL has to trim staff, and I was one of the ones who unfortunately was let go. But at the time, looking back on it, I probably should have taken a little time to kind of plan next steps, but I've never been one to just kind of sit and do nothing. So my last day with the NHL was on a Thursday. And I then went to work for a company called the Sports Company here in Oakville, who was a sales arm for Nike. And Nike at the time had, obviously they had big sales with Team Canada apparel. They had Tiger. So the golf was booming. And the gentleman there by the name of Chris Gilmore, who took me in right away, treated me very well, basically put me in charge of his corporate sales, which I'd never done sales before. But he kind of let me carve my own path. And at the time, if Tiger won on Sunday, your phone was ringing Monday. And if Canada won gold in December, you were full January, February. So it was an easy sell proposition. And obviously Nike being the brand they are, you kind of had people calling you as opposed to doing a lot of chasing. But it was a great experience for me. But about 10 months into that job, Jim Gable called. He had gone over to Addy a few months prior and was putting together kind of his team, and asked me if I wanted to be manager of corporate communications for soccer and basketball. Mm-hmm. Full disclosure, I wasn't a big soccer basketball guy, but from a communication standpoint, really, that's kind of the marketing arm of the brand. You're picking up the programs from the Adidas office in Germany, and you're kind of customizing them for Canada, and you're working with different partners. And so being the comms manager for soccer basketball exposed me to a lot of relationships here within Toronto that a few of, frankly, my counterparts didn't get. So obviously the big one would have been MLSE when they got the TFC come in, and we were doing some work with the Raptors. Mm-hmm. So about 5 years into that job, we quickly realized that the MLSE relationship and different athletes relationships we were kind of starting to generate in Canada needed a full-time position as a sports marketing person. So I kind of put a package together to show the senior leadership team at Addy and said, look, if we're going to be in sports here in Canada, I think we need someone who will handle sports marketing. And obviously I raised my hand saying, I'd like to do it. I probably wasn't the best comms manager in the history of Adidas, but it was more related to kind of store relationships and different things. And my passion was absolutely on the relationship side of the business. So they agreed, luckily. And I basically oversaw the relationships between us, MLSE, who at the time we weren't a full partner yet. We had the Canadian Football League. We had the NBA, and basically I was the representative for Adidas Canada in those relationships, and it kind of went from there. As luck would have it, everything kind of comes full circle. 5-6 years ago now, Adidas got the rights to the NHL. Mm-hmm. And kind of coming from that world and being a bit of a dual-hatted role anyway, from a product standpoint, they layered on licensed with me. And like I said, I kind of knew the world from my previous experience working with the US counterparts. And that's kind of how I got to where I am today. It's probably a unique position where you're handling both product and the corporate side of the relationships, athlete contracts and different things. Meanwhile, while you have a very capable team under you that's actually selling the product. So my days are never the same. You get to go to some really cool stuff, and you get to see some really cool product come to market. So I've been with Addy now. I'm actually going into my 16th year. And it's been an unbelievable ride. I wouldn't trade it for a thing. I think the day I was told that the NHL job was going away, I took it really hard. It was the first kind of major disappointment I'd had in my career. And I felt at the time I had lost that job through no fault of my own. And there was some disappointment, and not only the fact that I was out of a job, but the way it kind of came about. But I had a few people kind of pull me aside and say, look, you're going to be okay. Like sports, it feels like a big industry from the outside, but once you kind of get in it, it's pretty small, and somebody will come and kind of find you and you'll make your way. And that's exactly what happened. So that's kind of how I got to where I am today. To say it's been, it's been almost a 22 year process now, and I've loved every second of it.
Yeah, no, that's an unreal. I already have so many things I already want to ask, but that's an unreal route so far. But yeah, there's so many things that you said, even just I'm going to go to the beginning and then we'll work our way back.
Yeah.
It seems like the correct order to go. But even what you're saying in regards to, you started off as, wanting to be a teacher, right?
Yeah.
And something I noticed even with the podcast, and then even myself with speaking to all these different guests, is everyone kind of enters university for, I don't know, a teaching, history, X, Y, Z. And I went to school for accounting at the beginning. I was I'm going to go to KPMG. And then like you, I always had an interest in sports. I actually worked at TD Place, so where the 67s play. And I was working on the 67s, Red Blacks games. And, I was doing parking and transpo at the time, but I loved it. It was the best. I ended up staying there for 3 years. It's unreal. And I'm like, hey, no, you know what? It's time to grow up. I got to go to get a corporate job. So I went to accounting. And when I was in my accounting job, I'm like, oh, I hate this. I need to go back and find a way into,
Yeah.
get back at TD place or sports. And that's kind of how I went to sports marketing, because like you're saying, that environment, you're like, oh, wow, like that's what I need to do. So it was interesting that you said how you were volunteering at 67s games, because that kind of just struck a chord for me. And so the question I wanted to ask in regards to that is, the majority of our audience is young professionals or students. And, a lot of times, as I was saying, they enter school for one thing, and then they
Yeah.
realize, no, that's not for me. What did you do when you realized, hey, you know what? Maybe I don't want to be a teacher and I wanted to get into sports? Did you start networking? Did you start, I know you mentioned the Algonquin program, but what did you do to kind of, take that step to move towards sports?
Yeah. I didn't do nearly as much networking as I see some of the younger students like yourself and younger people like yourself do today. I was very lucky in the sense that I had people who knew people, and I happened to be related to her. When I went to Algonquin, the summer, I didn't graduate when I was supposed to from Carleton. Full disclosure, I may have taken a little longer than I should have, but the summer that I graduated, I just knew it wasn't in my heart to be a teacher. And like I say, I'm sure I would have loved it. I'm sure I would have, kind of figured out how that would have all managed. But I just felt like now's the time. So I found the program in Algonquin, and by the time I signed up that summer, I mean, Wendy Kennedy, who kind of ran the marketing program, was a great, kind of advice. She gave me some advice. She said, look, if this is what you want to do, I can't offer you specifically a co-op program, but you're going to have to kind of figure out what you want to do. So to your point about Ottawa, I mean, you had the 67s. I think they were the Rough Riders at the time.
Yeah, Rough Riders.
And the Sens didn't exist at that point, or they just come into. So it was the 67s. And, when I was leaving, like when the 67s play Friday night at 7:00, and you're living in a house with guys who are just getting ready to go out on a Friday night, and you're making your way to a rink to take tickets for the 50-50 or to make sure that the contest winner for the second period gets on the ice and shoots the puck, and you're loving every second of it, then that's what you're doing. So a lot of the times I'll tell, students who approach me, yeah, you're going to go to university and or college or both. You're going to get a degree in something, but don't necessarily feel like just get the degree. Yeah. And when I'm interviewing a student or when I'm talking to somebody, I don't look at, oh, it says here you have a degree in accounting. What are you doing, being an activation? Like, I don't, it just shows to me that you could start something and get it done. And the other thing that can you keep in mind, and to your earlier point about, working the parking, is your first job is probably not going to be your dream job. Yeah. But it's a job in the industry, and if it catches and you get inspired and you want to go to it, then you kind of know you're onto something, right? Like, then you kind of know, yeah, I could do this for a while. Because a lot of times, and I'm sure you've heard this, or maybe haven't from your other guests, everybody wants to be in sports. Everybody wants to be in kind of this industry. But if you're getting into it to get rich quick, you're not gonna. It takes a long time to kind of get up to those levels, and it's a lot of nights and it's a lot of different things. You're like, oh my god, like why am I working a parking lot? But the fact that you're working a parking lot at TD Arena, or the fact that you're staying after the 67s game to help clean out the arena because they have another game on Sunday, and you don't care, you're actually happy to be there. That's when you're going to know. That's when you're going to feel it. And from there, I say, once you get in, it's easy to find your way via there. Jobs will come, jobs will go, but it's just to get that first step, see what it makes you feel like, and go from there.
No, yeah, that's very interesting to say that, because in the moment, right, when I'm working parking when I was a teenager, that didn't come to mind, right? Yeah. And I was missing things with friends, like you were saying. I wasn't going out with friends because my friends actually ended up working with me as well. So we had a great time. We were doing 18-hour shifts. I remember for like a UFC fight once, and we were there from 6 a.m. to 2 a.m. But we're still laughing all the way to land, and we went back to work the next morning at 6 a.m. again. But yeah, no. now that you say that, everything's kind of starting to come back to mind. But
Yeah.
yeah, that makes sense. And full disclosure to whoever's listening, I actually didn't start networking until my very last semester because I was in accounting and I was like, oh, everyone needs an accountant. I don't need to network. And then as soon as I made the switch, I was like, oh, wow, like I need to start networking. So I only started networking at the very, very last possible minute. And then a couple months later is when I started the podcast. So there's plenty of time for anyone that wants to network. Yeah. And then now what I kind of want to get into is, your position at the NHL, right? You were mentioning how, you're trying to get into Mizuno, or actually, let's go to that first. Either one works. But the one thing that I really wanted to ask was, you said underqualified for NHL, right?
Yeah.
So let's say coming out of school, whether it's Mizuno or even the NHL, what would you say to these students, right? Because you see these huge positions, everything says, hey, 3 to 5 years of marketing experience, or hey, X, Y, Z, all this experience that maybe a lot of students don't have. What would you say to these students in regards to either get it or even just to be confident enough to apply for these positions?
Yeah, it's a good question. I applied for the role because it was the NHL, and when you looked at the description, and it's funny, Barry and I are still friends to this day, and he's never actually, confirmed to me that when the first interview were underqualified, but I've been very lucky. But if I don't take the shot and don't get the interview, then that's like if you just look at yourself as a piece of paper with a list of jobs on a resume, yeah, you probably realistically you're a long shot. But if you don't take a chance and get into the interview, then you'll never know for sure. So frankly, what have you got to lose? And I know it's easy for me to say now because I've been very lucky with the jobs I've had. And I know that a lot of people are applying for a lot of jobs and they're simply never getting feedback, or they're just not even getting to the interview space. But one of them will click. And to me, it's 99% of how you come off in the interview. Mm-hmm. Like I say, I think I had 3 interviews with Barry, 1 interview with the head of the department at the time. And every interview I came out of there exhausted, but I was like, I think I did okay. And it could be the one question that you kind of treat as a throwaway question that you answer in a way that the person who's doing the interviewing likes. And yeah, anything can be learned. So as long as you're kind of, if you're a relationship person, or if your strengths are, in how you interact with people, or how you kind of manage your, like, they may find something that you don't even know that you have during the interview process. And they're going to say, yeah, that's the person for the job. And the 5 years I was at the league, the first year and a bit, yeah, I was learning a ton from not only Barry, but, even like the retailers, the teams, like they were teaching me stuff about how to sell, and eventually you just kind of absorb that and you grow into the role. But for sure, I was lucky. It takes a break, but I got the break because I just said, what the hell do I have to lose, right? And at least I can say, if I never even get a call back, at least I can walk into the Mizuno office and say, guys, look at this. I got a rejection letter from the NHL. Right? It was kind of like, it was, I didn't go in with, I'm going to get this job. It's perfect fit for me. I went in with a 1 in a million shot probably, and the 1 in a million came through. And like I say, I think from going through the interview process, and each time I got through to the next round, you're like, maybe there's something. And then, like I say, when Barry called me that Christmas Eve, I was just like, I couldn't even put it into words how happy I was, first of all, and that, yeah, he took a chance. And I've often tried to do that, kind of pay that back in different ways as I go through my own career to maybe give somebody a shot, or maybe, take the extra 10, 15 minutes for a student or somebody who's trying to reach out in the industry, and be sure, yeah, I'll be your, sure, I'll, because it just takes, and I tell a lot of people, it just takes one name, one phone call, and you might leave an impression with someone that you don't even realize you've left. And they might be looking for somebody, and all of a sudden they say, oh, I remember talking to so-and-so at some event, and they'll call, and it'll happen. So I think you should never not take a shot, right? Not to quote the Gretzky comment, but you should never not take that. Like it's true. Yeah. It's true.
No.
Yeah.
No, 100. And I was about to quote that, so it's funny enough that you said it, but no, you're not wrong. And when I came out of school, obviously the pandemic hit at a weird time, but I saw this video and it said, "Hey, apply," right? So I was applying to the Warriors, the Raiders, X, Y, Z, and even though it was the pandemic, so it was a little tough. I was getting these emails back from the Warriors, right? And I was like, "Hey, mom, look at this," right? So it's cool things like that where, sometimes these companies where I thought I'm like, "Oh, I can get that position." They wouldn't get back to me, but then, a director position I applied for a ski company in Austria or the Warriors or the Raiders, they'd get back to me and be like, "Hey, obviously you don't fit for the position, but we're going to keep you on file." So it definitely does make sense, and it does that. Yeah, and then the other question I wanted to kind of get into now, we're talking about, getting into your position at the NHL, and then you said the lockout took place, right? And that obviously was a big moment in your career, right? Because you said otherwise maybe you'd still be there.
Yeah.
But really kind of started this next, I was going to say path, but let's say route in your career, right? So do you mind maybe taking us through that and how you were able to kind of overcome it? Because frankly, I'm sure a lot of young professionals or even students are in a similar position in regards to the pandemic, right? Where a lot of these sports jobs got cut, and then now they're starting to come back up again.
Yeah. So the last season, kind of before the lockout, I mean, some of your viewers are probably too young to remember, but everybody kind of in the world knew it was coming. And the league did everything they could to protect as many as they could. But frankly, if there's no revenue coming in, so I remember the day distinctly, and I frankly chickened out where they were gonna have everyone in the office, and if you went to room A, you were fine. If you went to room B, you were. And I didn't go. I was like, I don't want to hear it. I don't want to see it. And obviously, that evening, because I didn't go, actually, and he's still, I would consider a friend of mine, Colin Campbell called and said, "Hey, Jeff, I have to read you this letter. You've been let go temporarily, lockout, layoff." And I could tell it was just as hard for Coley to say it as it was for me to hear it. And it kind of put it into perspective, like, yeah, this sucks. This really sucks. And I was crushed, but it sucks for a lot of people. So as I knew it was kind of coming, I'd started to talk to some licensees, and I knew it was going to be tough on all of them, because if you're a licensee of the NHL and the NHL's not playing, it's not going to be good for anybody. But Chris Gilmore, who owns a sports company, approached me a couple of weeks before the kind of the D-Day, I'll say, and said, "Look, if you're interested, I may have something for you." And I took it, and I didn't, like I say, in hindsight, maybe I should have, in fairness to Chris and kind of the company, I should have taken a couple of weeks just to kind of absorb what had happened. But I was lucky and I got it, and I got into that job, and it kind of helped me get over the loss. And then, I remember going in to tell Chris, "Hey, I'm taking this job at Addy," and I got upset, because he had given me the chance. I felt bad for him because he had kind of come to me when I needed him, and it felt like I was kind of walking away from him a bit when it happened. But he was great about it. He said, "Yeah, it's a great opportunity. Go get it." So yeah, there's going to be some days that are shit, and they could be because of nothing you did, because that's, as we've seen in the last 2 years, and I've talked to a lot of students too that say, "Yeah, there's nothing going on." Yeah, that's not your fault, and lockouts aren't your fault, and franchises moving aren't your fault, and different things aren't your fault, and they're going to be shit. But take the time. I guess the point is, don't panic, because there's something will come up. And if you're in a job and you're doing it well and you're starting to build the name for yourself, that is equity that's far more valuable than anything you could put on a resume. And that'll eventually get you through. So yeah, right now, a lot of people are not getting jobs because of nothing that they did themselves. It's just, but it'll break and it'll come, with buildings opening back up and, the machine's starting to turn back on. We're seeing it from not only our sales standpoint, but from just, kind of the vibe we're getting from team sports. It'll come back. But I would just suggest, don't make any rash decisions. Don't leave the industry unless you're don't make a move that you're going to regret. simply because of the fact, oh my God, I can't be out of a job, because things will turn. They will turn.
Yeah, no, that does make a lot of sense. Where I was going to make a comment in regards to, the lockout took away a Stanley Cup from the Senators, but that's not as important in regards to what you're saying.
No, okay,
Yeah.
we could say that, Chris. We could say that, yeah.
That's how it helps me sleep at night with that.
All right, yeah, fair enough.
Yeah. But no, it does make a lot of sense, right? Where even myself, right? Where that's how this kind of podcast, maybe kind of went more about. Where actually, now that I think about it, and sometimes it's crazy to forget because so much has happened in regards to the pandemic, but the actual day that everything kind of closed down, I remember I woke up at 6 a.m. I'm in Ottawa. My parents woke me up. They're like, "Hey, you can't go on the train. It's probably not safe enough. So like, you have to drive to your meeting in Toronto," because I had an interview with the MLSE, Argos, the Marlies, and I had other meetings the next day too. Yeah. So I drive all the way to Toronto, straight there. They woke me up early, so I was groggy. And as soon as I parked the car in Toronto, finally checked my phone, it's blowing up. Hey, everything's canceled. Everyone's getting sent home from MLSE. The conference I was going to, everything's canceled. And I was like, oh, wow, like this is changing now, right? Yeah. So I just kind of turned around, went home, and kind of the thing you're saying, right, where, everyone maybe thought it was 2 weeks or whatever it was. And I was like, oh, I guess I'm going to do the podcast and start some different things like that. But yeah, no, it does make a lot of sense. And I definitely see what you're saying in regards to,
and it's funny from that perspective, when you hear that, like that to me is like, that's a tough story to hear, because you were on your way to who knows what.
Yeah.
But if it doesn't happen, 82 podcasts don't exist. Countless people, from everything that I've heard and seen, this is doing pretty well. Who knows how many people you've technically helped, or how many people you've kept, sane for listening, and certainly not, speaking on, it's just more so everything happens, and 82 podcasts are born from that cancellation. So yeah, you just never know. And I would be stunned if something amazing doesn't come out of this project that you've done here. Like, to me, anybody would be lucky to have it, because 82 podcasts, like everybody says, I'm going to start a podcast.
Yeah.
You're 82. So, the fact that you drove all the way to Toronto and had to drive all the way back, at least something like that. Yeah. And
I for sure agree with that, because now when I look back on it, look, I'm sure, if I landed the job with one of those teams there, it would have been great experience. But because of that, kind of almost laid me, like you're saying, where maybe you jumped too quickly to the next position after the lockout. Yeah. I think that's what it would have been for me, right? Where, I finished school, I kind of grinded away to finish early. And then I was like, Kate, get in sports. But then because of the lockdown, that's the pandemic, right? That took place.
Yeah.
Couldn't go straight to a job. And then kind of made me realize. And then, I was with a startup, and then I asked Atletico Ottawa, which was a new soccer team here. I'm like, hey, I'll work for free to kind of get experience, just because I want to see what it's like working with a team. And as great as it was, and even though there's an opportunity afterwards, I was like, you know what? Maybe working for a team isn't necessarily for me. So that's why now, White Whale Marketing, I wanted to kind of just try it out in regards to seeing if I can help out athletes, especially during this time. But I'm sure, who knows, right? Whether it's the podcast, whether it's White Whale Marketing, and even someone listening, right? If it's, a project you're doing at school. I remember I did something for Badminton Canada. It can always kind of end up leading to something else.
Yeah.
So with that, I want to kind of get into your role at, Adidas, right? You mentioned how you kind of went on to that. You might maybe sharing what it was like in these different roles that you had, because you briefly touched on it, but maybe we kind of give a little more detail.
So when I came over as communications manager for soccer and basketball, I think the marketing department for Adidas Canada at the time was 4 or 5 people. Wow. Obviously, huge global brand, huge, exposure from a global standpoint. Then you kind of trickle that down to the U.S., huge brand in the U.S., and then you get to Canada, and we're a brand, but we don't have the resources that those two would have. So you kind of became a jack of all trades, right? Because you just had to. Like, you weren't, because I was soccer communications manager for, but that doesn't necessarily mean I wasn't touching in-store, and I wasn't touching, PR to a certain extent. Like social obviously wasn't as big back then, but you kind of had to do whatever had to be done.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember there was a World Cup. There was a World Cup, and we did a cross Canada event where we kind of brought in different elements, and we brought in different sponsors, and we basically started in Vancouver and worked our way to Toronto. It was the France-Italy final where Zidane headbutted the guy. I can't remember.
2006?
Yeah. So it was a huge global program, and we kind of took it on as, okay, we're going to Canadianize this. We can't do what Global's doing where they're literally, going around the world, but we said we'll do a trip across Canada. And the caravan kind of lands in Vancouver, and we head out to, I think it was the field at UBC, and we talked to all the local clubs, and I'd worked with sales, and we'd worked with kind of, the local teams, thinking, yeah, there's going to be 5,000 people here. We got a screen, we got different kicking cages and interactions. Maybe we got 50, maybe.
Wow.
Holy crap. Like, so you're kind of like, okay, we got 5 more stops to make. But running that event and kind of, because technically it wasn't part of the job description. Running an event across the country is not in any job description. It's just, they say, here, go do it. We got to Toronto. We probably had 25,000 people there. We had the field. We had, the big screen on. We'd worked with the Rogers Center, I guess Skydome at the time. We'd worked with Ticketmaster. We brought in all these different things. And I remember standing on the field right before the game starts, and it was 25,000 people. And it was just like, this is amazing. What we've pulled off as a small brand or a small group in Canada is amazing. And I had an activation team with me who did a great job. And then you're like, okay, what's next? And you just kind of get all these different exposures being in a small company that a smaller kind of department that you wouldn't normally get. And like I say, from there, you just kind of start to do different things and branch out. And, we start to do better as a brand in Canada, and, sales start to justify the people you bring in. And you eventually, you build up somebody you bring in somebody who can do the trade, and you can bring in somebody who can do the communications. And, we got to a point where we needed somebody to do sports marketing specifically. So that's how it kind of came about. And now, when you're talking to athletes and talking to different clubs and, relationships and working with leagues, and that's something I never would, if I'd have just stayed within the job description, I never would have been able to kind of get to the next step. So, like I say, my time with Addy it's been not only very fulfilling, but I've learned a ton, and I expect that to continue, right? Like, our world's going to change again. It changes. You can almost set your kind of watch by it. The world changes really every 5 years. Like, it's something just, so that those kind of experiences and moving through the company and kind of being allowed to kind of take on maybe a little more than we should have. Like, in theory, that tour should have been hired by an event company. Like, we should have been able, but we didn't. Marketing dollars aren't there, so you figure it out. Different programs we've done should have been hired by an agency, or different, the MLSC relationship technically could be, handled by a team, but we figure it out. And that's kind of what we do as a brand. Because you have to, and that's, like I say, I've never had 2 days the same probably working at Addy the last 16 years. It's always something different. And that's really what I'm grateful for, because you don't know what's coming around the corner, and sometimes you're called in to help stuff or with stuff that you never thought, well, it's not what's in my role. So if you simply follow what's written in your job description, you're probably going to do yourself a disservice. You kind of got to get into the brand and poke around. So, that's why maybe sometimes smaller brands are better, because you are going to do stuff that you never thought you'd be doing, because simply in a big brand, they've got 10 people who could do it. Whereas in a smaller brand, it's you got to figure it out. So I've been lucky in the sense that with Addy, they've let me learn. They've let me grow. I've had some great leaders. I have a great leader right now who kind of just says, yeah, let's figure it out and go from there. And we're with a small team, I think there's a tightness factor there that you probably wouldn't get if you're in a big agency or a big corporation. That really, in the end, when we win together, and when we kind of don't win, is we figure it out and then move on to the next thing. So I've been lucky in that sense for sure with Addy, that it's kind of the best of both worlds. You have this huge mothership running the show. You've got the U.S. that is obviously there. It's kind of an influential factor. And then you've got Canada where you can kind of dictate and figure out how things work for your market specifically.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. Where I'm just trying to remember, there's 3 things I want to touch on here that I'm pretty sure. But in regards to what you're saying, how kind of going beyond the job description, right? So, with these chats or even with some of the experiences I've had, I'd ask, hey, what's a way that someone can stand out, right? Whether it's a student or even if it was me, like, hey, how can I get to a director level? What do I need to do to get there, right? And some of the things they're saying was, they would have interns in the past or even currently where or even people, managers, coordinators, whatever. They're like, oh no, that's not my job description. I'm doing this, and they're like, the people that actually do stand out is kind of what you're saying, right? Where they're like, yeah, I'll go on that tour. Hey, I'll take on that event, and hey, my day will be different every day for the next 16 years. And so that does make a lot of sense. And the other thing was, so it's 2. I remember the other one. No, I don't remember it off the top of my head. I should have written it down. Was in regards to, you were talking about sports marketing. That's kind of interesting because that's, I have a marketing degree from, the University of Ottawa, as they say. But yeah, how does that work in regards to, you as Adidas, right? If you're working with an athlete, but then you're also the brand. Yesterday, we recorded a podcast for, myself and 2 guys that helped me out, and we're talking about, nil deals, right? So the NIL and, how Arby's was paying running backs $500. And we really wanted to kind of showcase, hey, is it worth it for Arby's to be paying it $500, or is it worth it for the athlete to even accept a deal with that, right? And we're kind of breaking it down. So how do you kind of balance both? Because Adidas, I'm sure, has players like McDavid where you're very highly invested in.
Yeah.
So you want to take care of him and not what's the politically correct word?
Yeah, I know exactly. Thinking.
So how do you balance that relationship? Because obviously you want the best for Adidas, but then there's also you want the best for the your Adidas athletes.
Yeah. So one of the things that I kind of have fallen into, or I guess how my role has evolved, is those types of negotiations. And I'm lucky that Adidas provided training and different things to kind of the art of negotiation, for lack of a better term. But yeah, a lot of the times I would say my earlier deals, I was probably a little over generous. Because you're trying to sign an athlete, you're trying to do what's best for them. But, my current leader, Stu Smith, he's like, treat it like it was if it was your own money. And that, when he said that, I was like, yeah, okay. So now there's the levels to your contracts. Obviously, MLSE is a big contract, but if we're looking at one of the players on the Canadian women's soccer team, or we're looking at a kid just coming up through the MLS ranks, obviously you want somebody who's going to want to be part of the brand, who's going to represent your brand, and you want to pay what's fair, but you kind of have to have, are you established, and kind of what are your views on certain things, and are you gonna, we kind of have gone away from what we used to call basically boots on pitch deals, where for an MLS game, when you watched a game, I wanted you to see 11 pair of shoes on 11 starters for both sides, and we would simply pay for boots on pitch. Now, when we sign an athlete, we take a lot more into consideration. What are their views on sustainability, and what are their views on kind of quality, and are they active within those realms, and what is their social like? So you have to take that stuff now into consideration and find what might be the best fit for the brand. So you might have the best soccer player in the world. If your brand doesn't align with their mindset, then it just might not work, because what we found is free shoes and free contracts are all great, but if you're not on the same page with the athlete when it comes to like, hey, I need you to represent us, whether it be during Black Lives Matter or the Indigenous, topic, like I need you to potentially be a voice for that. If you're not comfortable, that's fine, but we're going to scale this agreement accordingly, right? Like we'll support you in your career, but we just have to be, from a brand standpoint, we're far more conscious now of, those kind of things. And when you go into a negotiation, you kind of have different viewpoints. And obviously the agent is doing what they can for the player as best they can to get them as much in as they can. And we're trying to, not only, help support the athlete, but we're protecting a brand. Mm-hmm. And we want to, the ROI has to be there now. And ROI is really tough to measure when you're signing a soccer player or when you're signing a hockey player or anybody for that matter, because you'll never know for sure how many pair of boots you've sold simply because this player on TFC is wearing it. You'll just never know. It's impossible to tell. But if there's an alignment there with the same thought process and the same mentality and the same passions, then it's probably going to be a good relationship for both sides. If you, if I'm approached by an agent who says, well, we're talking to this brand and we're talking to this brand and we're talking to your brand, I'm like, okay, well, usually the first question I'll ask is, well, what is it you know about my brand? Off pitch or off ice or, not on the field of play? What does Addy stand for? If they can't answer the question or the athlete can't answer the question, then it's probably not going to work. Right. So we kind of just say, well, we're going to come at you here with a deal that's maybe more proportionate to your response. So we've changed the approach for sure. And I mean, we're lucky in the soccer world that we're the top soccer brand in the world. So we have a lot of athletes coming to us, and we'll do those deals where you wear them and we'll support. But we're now looking for the athlete to be kind of more of a well-rounded representation of what the brand stands for.
Yeah, no, that's very interesting because that's kind of directly relevant to the two guys that helped me out. We were kind of just breaking down these different posts yesterday, right?
Yeah.
And we almost just started laughing about it because how crazy the numbers were fluctuating, right? Where we almost made a game of it. Or like, hey, how much do you think this is worth considering, when they post something in regards to football, the sport they play in, it's 10,000. But then when they posted this, sponsored post where, they're not smiling, they clearly don't care, they're just getting, the bag. How much do you think that, that changes?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And, we have an idea of numbers, but then when I actually said it, they were laughing or they're like, well, that makes no sense. So it's crazy to hear that a brand like Adidas and the team that you work with, that's things you take into consideration, because that's kind of the message I try to push to the athletes I work with as well, right? Because sometimes they're like, hey, this hat company reached out to us. They're like, should I do it? And I was like, no, it doesn't make any sense. They literally just want, you to wear the hat and that's it. And your followers or audience won't appreciate that. And the example I will use in case people didn't listen to the White Whale Marketing podcast is, so we're looking at these nil deals, right? I think it was the Ohio State running back. I forget his name. He has 6 posts, okay? 5 of them are him on the field running the football. That's it. So we have no idea what he's actually about, who that player actually is, and like you're saying, basically what their views are. And then I think the 5th post is him with this Camaro at this car dealership, right? Not smiling. He literally just takes a screenshot of whatever that car company posted and puts it on his feed. And then we kind of put the numbers into our system and into the software that we use. And when he posts something regarding football, $6,500 of social value on Instagram. So, okay, that's pretty good. You could charge, a nice penny for that.
Yeah.
And then, I asked my guys, I'm like, hey, what do you think the post is worth, considering he's not smiling? We have no idea what he is. And they're like, I don't know, 4,000, maybe 1,800. It's 213. So clearly it didn't translate to his audience and it just crashed, right? So that's the thing that we're kind of laughing at, where we're like, this perfectly shows it matters, right? If you're aligned with the brand or if you guys have similar interests, right? So it's very cool to hear that you guys do something similar.
It's funny, if the consumer looking at that post doesn't feel you're credible, they will literally beat the hell out of you. They will call you on that right away. And when we post, stuff from a brand perspective, if it's not credible and doesn't speak to who the brand is, they call it out, as they should. So if you're, the NIL thing is so interesting because, I get it. And we'd be talking for hours if we got down the whole NC2A road, but it's just, if it's not credible on both sides, then it just doesn't, what's the point, right? So, for us, we look at credibility as a way of not only kind of justifying who we're signing and who we're working with from not only a consumer product standpoint, but from are you going to speak to the brand when in an appropriate way that it comes off as credible? Because if you're not, it'll be spotted right away, and then we might as well just say, okay, well, thanks very much, and we'll move on. So, yeah, I know that's an interesting point of view for sure on the values of these.
Mm-hmm.
Consumers are too sophisticated right now to try and sneak away with something, right? It's just, you can't do it. It's impossible.
Yeah, I completely agree, and that's something I'm never going to forget now. Where it's the perfect example because usually you see it's basically about the same, maybe a small drop off, but considering it almost like 90-something% drop.
Yeah, that's crazy, but not surprising. Yeah.
Yeah, no, for sure. That's it's very interesting to hear, and I can talk about that for hours. But maybe kind of round it out, and before we kind of get into the last two questions, I'd like to ask, what else can maybe you tell us about being a director, right? Because that's a lot of the spots where maybe these young professionals, people that are managers now, or even young professionals, where maybe they're Googling, hey, how to become a marketing director in sports. I Googled that when I was 17, right? Like word for word. So what can you tell us about that? What is it like? What kind of things should people, do?
That's a very good question. So I've been a director now. I can't maybe 3 or 4 years, maybe longer. Time goes by so fast. And what I found is, the job almost becomes more about the people on your team and making sure that they're okay than the actual kind of sports marketing side of it. Obviously, you're kind of involved in some conversations at a higher level that affect the way the business is run and decisions are made. But I've found since I've become a director that a lot more of my time, even when I was kind of a manager with a smaller team, just making sure that the people who are under you and who kind of are on your team and are supporting the brand and in their very capable way are okay. Like the last 18 months have taught me for sure that if your people are struggling and they're not happy and they could be going through stuff that you had no clue about, then all you have to be empathetic and you have to listen, and you can't, at some point you might have to take the foot off the gas. And I think everybody, there's a persona around a director where it's like, get this done or you're gonna have a problem. That mentality is so not, it's just not conducive to a successful team anymore. That the part about being a director surprised me more. And I think what eventually got me over the hump from manager to director is, the responsibilities and some of the conversations I was having were, for lack of a better term, they were at a director level, right? Like it's if you're going into a meeting with someone and they kind of see, well, is this person the final decision maker, and where's this going to all end up? Then that definitely is why I got the job. But it's just what surprised me the most is when I got the job as to how much the focus changed to the people. So I think as you're going up through the ranks, for sure you have to do your job well. You have to learn your craft, and you'll eventually get into those type of meetings. But you can't do it at the expense of others on the way up, because if your team all of a sudden decides that I'm not going to do this, then you got a problem. I've had leaders who, and I've told them this, I'd said, I would run through a brick wall for you simply because you're just that type of person. That's the level of kind of relationship that you kind of aspire to. And I'm definitely still not there. I still have work to do on that. I think it's something that you work on every day. But what you're hoping for is that your team knows you have their back, and that you would do anything for them, because that's what makes you a director. That's what makes you a VP. Yeah, the business is the business, but without the people, it'll all fall apart real quick. And I've had some great team members along the way, still do. So that's what you kind of got to just be constantly working towards, is to be the person that you want to be perceived as. If you get to be a director and you've pissed off 90% of the people that you've ever dealt with in your life, you're probably not going to be a director very long, or you might not be a very, frankly, popular one. And then what's the point of that?
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense, right? Where not to be cheesy and connect sports always back to sports, but it's kind of just that team aspect you're saying,
Yeah.
right? Where it is your marketing department, but it's also like your marketing team, right? Where, you're only going to win if you guys can kind of come together, right? So
Exactly.
it makes a lot of sense. This has been great. Like my notes are all over the place as usual, but I have two final questions I'd like to ask everyone at the end. So my eyes, ever since I was a kid, I'm going to live until I'm 103. Okay. So that's my goal. So let's say for yourself, when you're 103, you're in your rocking chair, just going back and forth, thinking about the great experiences you had in your career. What's a moment in time that stood out to you? So what's a story that, like, wow, I can't believe I got to do that in my career?
Oh, geez. As we speak right now, because maybe there's moments to come that I don't know.
Yeah.
As we speak right now, I would think. So I grew up a huge Boston Bruins fan. Big. Ray Bourque goes to Colorado, breaks my heart, but they obviously make it to the Stanley Cup final. And being from the Canadian office, they were playing New Jersey. So there was no reason for us to be there at all. Mm-hmm. But boss comes in, he's like, hey, do you want to come to Colorado and potentially do the locker room headwear? I'm like, I'm on a plane, I'm gone. Colorado wins a cup. I go into the dressing room and I have a hat in my hand, and I'm only going to give this hat to one guy. One guy. He comes around the corner. He's got the cup. He puts it down. He gives it to somebody, and I walk over to Ray Bourque, and I give Ray Bourque his hat, and he puts it on, and he's like, thanks, kid.
Wow. And
I was just like, okay, I'm going to walk out of the room now because, first of all, I'm going to bawl my eyes out. And it was like, I couldn't breathe. Like I was just like, what am I doing in the Colorado Avalanche dressing room, handing a hat to Ray Bourque? Like it's mind-boggling to me.
Wow.
So that one was definitely top of the list. And then I think another one was just this past year. And this is all through the leadership of Michael Rossi and the senior leadership team at Addy. We said we're going to give this Terry Fox thing, this Terry Fox Association, we're going to give it a real go. Obviously, Addy has a real close affiliation with the Terry Fox Association. Mm-hmm. And so we did, a couple of my team members worked on the design of T-shirts, and a few other coworkers did the shoes, and we put it together, and we wound up raising $1.6 million for the Terry Fox Foundation. And there's a plaque that's sitting right there that basically just says, thank you, Adidas Canada, $1.6 million. I'll never forget it. And I'm not saying we're necessarily done with the Terry Fox Foundation, but that's another big one. Like, I know everybody, unfortunately, on this podcast who's listening to the podcast has been affected by cancer. To see and hear the gratitude from the foundation and kind of know that you were a very small part of a campaign like that, we always say at Addy, through sport, we have the power to change lives. That one was big. So, kind of a smaller one from a personal standpoint, and then a company one, those two would stand out for me for sure.
Yeah, no, those are both like unreal, right? To be able to experience, right? Where you're saying you're a Boston Bruins fan, you're being able to give the hat to Ray Bourque. Like, I understand why you'd bawl your eyes out.
It was close.
I'm sure I would have. And then in regards to Terry Fox, right? It's perfect timing. If I'm not mistaken, it's usually around this time, right?
The run was a couple weeks ago, and obviously with COVID, we couldn't do the program we did, but we repeated on some T-shirts and stuff. And I look forward to working with them again. But just to know that a brand that you're affiliated with, and kind of you had, like I say, a very small part to come up with $1.6 million to give to those people who are, they just worked their ass off in Terry's name was pretty cool.
Yeah, no, I bet. And yeah, the last question I'd like to ask everyone. So we went into the future, 103-year-old version of yourself. Now if we go back in time, 16-year-old Jeff, maybe even 18, you're about to go to Carleton because, I don't know, maybe you didn't go to Ottawa for some reason. If there is some type of life advice or even career, but even life, I find, because from these coffee chats, sometimes it's the simplest things people say, whether it's, hey, be nice, or hey, the smallest things I find I've picked up where, yes, they're applicable to the career, but it's applicable to everything else as well. what's something you would say to, 18, 17, 16-year-old Jeff if you can kind of go back in time and something that, you wish you knew earlier?
I think I wish I would have known how fast it would go and to take the time to celebrate the wins, mourn the losses, but just realize that at the time when I was 18, not really knowing what I wanted to do, and then kind of slowly making my way and getting, each step of the way kind of, I'm on to the next thing. It just goes by so fast. Just take the time, celebrate the wins, reflect on the losses, because in the blink of an eye, it's over, right? And I've still got many years left, hopefully, in my career. But 1999, getting that phone call, or all the different steps I've taken, they seem like they were yesterday, but it's a long time ago now, and it just goes by so fast. And I always, when I do these talks with students and stuff, and you can hear it in their voice that they just can't wait they want to get in, they want to get started, they want to get in, and they kind of want to start their careers. And I wish them all the luck in the world, and I hope they all get to where they want to be. But I hope at some point they just stop, look back, and take the time to reflect on what they've accomplished, how they got there, and enjoy the time, because it's quick. It's really quick. And I know I'm turning 50 in 2 weeks. And it's starting to set in that, I was just starting out in this world not that long ago, but when you start to look back, it's been quick. So I know it probably is a little more philosophical than what.
No, that's perfect.
Just take the time to enjoy every second, because it goes by fast.
Yeah, no, it's perfect timing you say that, because my birthday is quickly approaching too, and I'm not that 24 is old or anything, but I'm about to turn 24, and I'm just thinking that, like my last university class is going on 2 years ago now, right? In December, and then I'm like, wow, like can't believe it's already been 2 years. It felt like I was in school like last semester, right? Yeah. So I for sure see that, and I like to think this podcast is a nice way to do that, where I'm going to go do episode 80, record that, and every 20 episodes I kind of just do a little recap for 103-year-old Chris when he's on his rocking chair, so you can remember what I did once. But no, I think that's a great way to end the podcast. Unless there's anything else you'd like to share, as always, my notebook is all over the place, so hopefully I can.
Yeah, no, this has been a really enjoyable experience, Chris. I appreciate the invite. Like I say, if I'd have known about Ottawa U beforehand, I probably would have politely declined, but you did well. We got over that little ugliness at the beginning. It's been an absolute pleasure, and like I say, I wish you all the best with it. I've become a fan myself, so thank you for this. And I wish you and your listeners all the luck in the world, because I know this industry can be very, really tough to kind of get your foot in the door. But trust me, when you do, it'll be the ultimate reward, because it's a lot of fun.
Yeah. Thank you so much, and it was great having you on.
Thank you.